Welcome to all new First Issues, the weekly #1 comics review show. These are the pulls from the week of March 25th, 2016. There's a couple of comics that are most definitely going to be rant-inducing, so you've been warned. And yes, we're actually starting off with the biggest one that has puffled the collective jigglies. Marvel's Captain America Steve Rogers #1, written by Nick Spencer and art by Jesus Saez. Okay, so Steve Rogers is now young and working for S.H.I.E.L.D. with a team of star-spangled lackeys like Jack Flag and Free Spirit, plus Rick Jones on IT. And it's basically a standard Captain America romp, with him and his new team going after Red Skull and Baron Zemo's new Masters of Evil. That is until the ending. But throughout this issue we also see a young Steve from the 1920s with his abusive father being batted away by a mysterious woman so he and his mom can walk with her home. Now, before I get into the big controversy, the art in this is good. His new costume is passable. It's not the worst, but it's not the best he's looked. That is still a scale mail, but nostalgia and all that aside, it's not bad. Otherwise, everything else looks good in this, though the backgrounds do tend to be a pretty basic or almost non-existent at points. Either way, it's not a bad-looking comic. To the writing. Nick Spencer revisiting the abusive dad angle to start his 1920s flashback history thing is a great example of harkening back to when Marvel did allow characters to have emotional moments and an actual character to them. I dug that, and up until Cap throws Flag Boy out of his airplane, everything basically runs like a Cap book. Yes, here's where the big controversy is. Steve Rogers, that boy from Brooklyn, the guy who quit being Captain America because he was not going to be a government puppet, the man who stood against registering superheroes so they wouldn't be controlled by the government, the man who's punched Red Skull longer than most any one of us has even been alive, is in fact Hydra. Does that upset me? Not as much as I thought it would. Stop the flaming comments right now and listen. No, I'm not going to pull that stupid "it's comics, don't worry, lulz" BS, because really, that's glossing over the fact that a bad story can be a bad story, or that throwing away 75 years of continuity isn't hurtful to actual readers. No, that's not why I'm okay with this. I'm okay with this because of two things, mainly. One, Nick Spencer actually handles the character very well, and while this is a huge twist, like with most first issues, we only get to see the setup for it. And two, before the Hail Hydra thing, Steve speaks about wanting a better world and everything that really is still very Captain America, meaning that this could easily be a case of Hydra in the 20s maybe wasn't so horrible. Maybe the reason that he's actually been so against people like Baron Zemo and the Red Skull are because they've bastardized beliefs he was taught. I mean, it'd be a great way to set up the fact that Red Skull set up a suicide bomber. That was weird. And I know I said there were two, but here's the biggest one. After Secret Wars, Marvel got themselves a free Reboot the Character license. Now you listening at home can go, no, that's not what it did at all. But think about it. We're in the all-new, all-different universe, which has changed a lot of things, including bringing other characters from other worlds over and allowing for continuity retconning because everything's different now. So, in short, go out and read this for yourself with an open mind. However, I do want to end this this is probably a lot more hilarious since in the last couple days, as of writing this, Give Captain America a Boyfriend has been trending. So it actually comes off as, oh, they wanted to be gay, huh? Nope, made him Hydra. It tickles my fancy. Next up is something less controversial. Marvel's Nighthawk #1, written by David F. Walker, with art by Ramon Villalobos and colors by Tamara Bonvillain. That was a lot better than I was expecting. So this is the Nighthawk of Earth. Well, they do give it a number, but looks-wise I'd say the Supreme Powers universe, especially with how max he takes his crime fighting. He seems to be integrating rather well into the ANAD universe, at least enough so that he can out-Batman at a lot of points in this, but it works so well. He's got a good plucky sidekick that actually really ramps up his isolation and loneliness. The plot is that Nighthawk is now on the case, sort of a new serial killer being called the Revelator, with his alter ego dealing with a man who wants to run the city on a business front. Dave Walker has not written a bad book yet, at least from what I've seen of his Shaft stuff. And I didn't know what I was thinking for this. I mean, even the best writers seem to hit a tar pit when it comes to writing for Marvel, except when doing what Mouseville execs would probably consider throwaway books. And while this should be one that I could say skip because it's freaking Nighthawk, this is the Marvel I miss. One dripping with character and themes without being blatant about it, while actually having humor come naturally. I mean, no, the John the Revelator joke wasn't laugh out loud funny, but it did get me to smirk. See, while the characterization and everything is Marvel, this actually feels so much more like a DC book. While it is hard to explain, stylistically it's a lot darker, dealing with who the character is and allowing the plot to run parallel with that characterization without ditching it for a simple action or comedy or fluff story or even a socially minded one. What I mean is that while this is socially minded, especially taking place in Chicago, it's not preachy or it's not going, oh, this is what the internet wants. Here, take that and leave us alone. It's also organic and great, and I don't think I can say enough good things about this writing that will give it justice. And I can't talk about this fantastic book without the great art attached to it, which is just awesome, staying on model, sticking perfectly on point with the writing, and never feels out of place. Everything is crisp and clean, but fluid without ever feeling rushed or rough. I really cannot say enough good things about this book, so go get it now. Especially if you're one of the people who dislike the swerve in cap, this will cleanse the palate perfectly. Oh, and Marvel also released 2 new guides for the MCU movies, Captain America the Winter Soldier and Ant-Man. Like I said with the last batch, these are just reference books that really aren't worth a lot considering the age we live in. If you like Marvel handbooks and everything, then you'll definitely get what you paid for. Otherwise, totally ignorable. I don't know if I have enough drugs for the next one, though. IDW's Hunter S. Thompson's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas #1, adapted by Troy Little and designed by Troy Little, Chris Ross, and Robbie Robbins. Who hasn't heard of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas before? 2 drugged out men go on a strange and surreal voyage through the desert. Yes, most people are familiar with the movie, but hey, it's Hunter S. Thompson, so you could probably make a saucy puppet show out of it, and it'd still be a great adaptation. Yes, I could see doing that now. No, I don't have that kind of money. Anyways, I know this will be short, but go and give it a read. Troy Little adapts it spectacularly to keep all the drug-induced oddity that made it such a brilliant, weird story intact, and the art kicks it too. So I know this is a very short review, but go and get it now, seriously. If you haven't seen the movie either, go do so now. Yes, I know it's a mortal sin to not quote it when reviewing it, but still. Next we have Dark Horse's Lobster Johnson, Metal Men of Midtown #1. Story by Mike Mignola and John Arcudi. Art by Tansi Zonjic. And colors by Dave Stewart. What a fantastic throwback to the 1930s pulp, especially with the older pulp heroes and the machines he's fighting. But when they rob a bank but don't take a dime, it's up to Lobster to find out who sent these robots and why they didn't take anything. As I said, this is a great throwback to a classic genre that is making a hard-pressed comeback in the indie scene that ignores the cape and cowl bunch to focus on a classic pulp hero, and it's awesome. Lobster Johnson is exactly what you want him to be in this classic archetype, but the mystery itself about the who's and whys for the Metal Men is also an intriguing mix that pushes the narrative forward really well, even ending on a "and Lobster shall die, mwahaha" sort of ending. The artwork is also fantastic to give it a neo-pulp treatment and really make it a timeless quality. So this is a good read for fans of the pulp genre, and I think might actually be a decent enough attempt to get into that niche for newcomers as well. Oh hey, a comic I've reviewed before. Chapterhouse Comics Life, Death, and Sorcery #1 by Danny Zabel. The plot to this is fairly simple. 2 sorcerers, witches, or magic users, what have you, steal something of great importance and are confronted with the guy wanting to get that back. They send sometime into the future. Cut to 100 years later, and we meet our lead protagonist, Amelia, and see how her life is going, all the while a mysterious voice speaks of magic and adventure to her. Yeah, it's actually pretty intriguing. And full disclosure, a month or 2 ago I did get a preview copy of this, and I am mainly restating what I said in that preview special. Now that that's out of the way, something I do want to bring up is that Zabel actually does what most writers don't, in that instead of just saying that Amelia's a tough girl, or making her just kind of a bitch and passing it off as being a deep character trait, he doesn't. he shows her as being ultimately a good person with compassion, but able to fail in heroism without making it the crux of the story. At least in this issue. As for the art, short answer is that it's good. It's got a very simple and clean look that carries very well into both the action, especially the magic fight at the beginning, to even just a talking scene at a tea bar. And interspersed throughout, we get hints of what will happen in the next few issues, such as Amelia and her sister not sticking around the homestead. So while this has been sitting in my mind for a couple months now, it is still totally worth the buy. It's an indie comic that deserves so much support, so buy it hard copy where you can, or get it digitally. Also from Chapterhouse this week, we have Chapterhouse's Chapterhouse Archives Northguard #1. Written by Mark Shaneblum, art by Gabriel Morrissey, and colors by Bernie Moralt. Time for Canadian political superhero. Northguard, or Le Protecteur in French, is a young man recruited by a private company to act as the peacekeeper in Canada, while industries and politicians threaten to turn Canada sour, such as a rally praising America. Okay. That's a very basic plot. This is something you definitely need to read to get the story fully. That's right, it's another Chapterhouse Archives where they basically do an HD remake of a comic from their back issues. And that's not a bad thing at all. It's how I first found out about Captain Canuck, and yes, in about 2 weeks I'll be doing an honest comic trailer on that. But regardless, this comic itself was created in 1984, and I'll be honest, I'm not sure what I think of it. While there is definitely a heavy political message to this book, it's not something that I can truly get behind. Not that I'm for Praise America rallies or Anglicizing Canada, wow. But it's because I'm not a Canadian national. So that bit of history doesn't really sink in as universally as a white power or drug cartel would. Yet even with that disconnect, this is a solid book even now. In this reprint, they add color to the book that honestly surprised me because looking at it, you can't really tell that it hasn't been colored 30 years ago, which is amazing. So besides that, as a superhero story, it definitely works great, with a very comic booky science, but a great setup to a story that could be fantastic, and I can't wait to see what happens next, from 30 years ago. And you know what? Everyone should pick this up. It's something truly special to see a comic out of its time, re-released in an age where even this political message actually still carries some relevancy in the world today. So everyone go out and get this for seeing where comics were years ago, and why they've always been a relevant medium. And failing all that, it's a fun read. Moving on, next we have Zenoscope's Robin Hood Annual #1, written by Pat Shand, art by Larry Watts, and colors by Slame Mugiono. So this is the epilogue to the Robin Hood ongoing from Zenoscope, where basically a woman named Robin Loxley gets transported to a magical land called Nottingham, has some great adventures, comes back to New York to become a paranormal investigator, and gets even more adventures until finally Marion Quinn, her partner in crime and basic best friend, is going to get married away from Robin's side. All that settled, good, because besides the domestics, Robin also gets a letter before being attacked by her fallen allies from Nottingham. And so much more happens. I love this book. I haven't been reading the Zenoscope Robin Hood ongoing at all, but I need to go back and do so because of this. This is a solid ending from what I've been told from readers, but even more so, this is a fantastic standalone issue. Pat Shand has a history with these characters, which is obvious because there's some backstory that you'll be missing from this, but it doesn't hinder the plot at all. His characters are rich and alive at the end of their questing time together, and Robin in particular really shows how war-torn she feels and acts. It is a great character piece for a hero, even in a vacuum away from the rest of the series. And that's not even getting into the dialogue and the attitude, which I know a couple people have compared it to Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and it's not wholly inept comparison, but this isn't quippy Buffy referencing that permeates a lot of the show. If anything, it'd be season 6 Buffy after she's come back from the dead and has no idea how to move on with her life. Slightly harder and definitely more jaded. Also, for all those that feel that comics need stronger women, this is a great example of that. And the artwork is also awesome. The character models are tight, even in the most intense action scene, but doesn't become something else when it's time to just have a slow dance. And the colors are vibrant, and this is just a great overall comic that even if you've never even heard of Zenoscope as a company, you should definitely be checking out. And now to bookend as I do the other of the big two companies, starting with DC's Scooby Apocalypse #1, with Keith Giffen on plot and breakdown, J.M. DeMatteis on dialogue, pencils and inks by Howard Porter, and colors by Hi-Fi. Alright, so Daphne Blake and Fred Jones are the host and cameraman for the show Mysterious Mysteries, currently trying to figure out how to get their viewership back after something happened 2 years ago. However, Dr. Velma Dinkley sneaks out of a secret military complex under the desert to find Daphne and Fred to have them blow the whistle on a special project. However, Shaggy, the complex dog trainer for their smart dog program, and Scooby, the failed prototype of said program, run across them and tag along as Velma explains everything. Yet, when they reach the safe zone in the complex, the base goes into lockdown. The big experiment, Project Elysium, has been released into the world, turning all of them into monsters, while Scooby and the gang are safe to see the aftermath. I remember when this was announced and everyone was up in arms over hipster Shaggy, and the whole damn ruined childhood thing. But you know what? I actually really dug this. Fred and Daphne are basically starting as runners on a show about mysteries, which is a good set for their dynamics, as well as used in other places like Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island and whatnot. Shaggy being a dog trainer and Scoob being a failed prototype, I actually think gives them a really good bond, especially after the When Shaggy Met Scooby backup story in this. It just works really well. And Velma, as a government super scientist, isn't that surprising. But this was just a setup to make an apocalypse, so seeing their dynamics grow out over the rest of this series will definitely be something to watch. Now, while I don't find the art a problem, I can definitely see why it isn't for everyone. It's got a bit of a flow to it and rough edges. Though I do think that Shaggy looks like the bastard son of Oliver Queen, which isn't a problem really since he's actually less hipster acting than his look would deem. The only niggle I had with the art was that Fred's face seemed to go off model noticeably a few times, and there's a heavy exposition drop from Velma in it, but honestly, those are only small niggles in a book that you should definitely check out. And finally, the most anticipated release, DC's DC Universe Rebirth #1, written by Jeff Johns with a slew of other artists and colorists. There's nothing that I can say about this that will give this book proper justice. Wally West, not the New 52 version mind you, but the Kid Flash himself from the before times, is being torn apart in the Speed Force, trying to visit any of the people he can to get the connection back to survive. But all that culminates with Batman finding a certain smiley face pin with human bean juice on it. And the doomsday clock ticks down. Yes, we all know that the New 52 got a lot of people pissy, but everyone, and I do mean everyone, needs to go out and buy this right now. The Wally West sections are truly feels-grabbing, especially if you've been a fan since the before time, you will get a little misty-eyed. But the reveal at the end of Batman pulling the bloody smiley face pin out of the wall, oh man, if you don't know why that's a huge thing, well then you need to read the classics more, or watch a Snyder movie once in a while. Jeff Johns is a master of making an epic tale, and when it involves the Flash family, he can knock it out of the park amazingly well, and he does that in spades here. But you honestly have to read it to see what I mean on the heart and just raw side of it. And while it's split into chapters drawn by different art teams, I almost want to say that this is the perfect way to rebirth not just the story and the universe, but the air-quote house style of the art, which really brings that crisp digital feel that the New 52 brought in with the line work and depth that Post-Crisis had. So all in all, this is a very much better rebirth than Flashpoint was, and this even does deal with some of the threads that have been hanging since then. Oh, and a warning, this takes place after Justice League #50 and Superman #52, so there's some spoilers in there for either book. And that's a wrap, everyone. This week was awesome to the max, and even Marvel had a solid game across the board. If you agree or disagree with any of my opinions, or if I missed a comic that came out this week, leave a comment below. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Bradley Nephilim for comic randomness, and on the Archivist Facebook page for other great books that I can't cover on all new first issues. Links to those in the description. Plus, don't forget to check out some amazing articles on Badly Productions with gaming, comics, movies, manga, and so much more. Look around, it's an awesome place. As always, stay golden, Inklings.